All right, team, today we are going to talk about data. And I know what you're thinking. How could data be interesting at all? Well, it can get you everything you want from your business. It can take you from uncertain to unstoppable, which I think everybody wants. And so the way we're going to start this is talking about the 7 truths that you must believe in order to get everything you want, to make all that a reality. So number 1 is what gets measured gets done. And what we're talking about there is that you first have to create an awareness. Some measures that you're going to create an awareness, bring to the forefront, have the team bought into, and then that creates a lot of pressure around that. You're going to take action on those measurables, and then ultimately that's going to drive you to getting what you want.
What happens when you're measuring the wrong things?
If you measure the wrong things, you're probably going to regret it at some point because you're going to create pressure around the wrong things. You're going to take action and drive results to something that you don't want. So you got to make sure that all of your measurables are in line with your vision, where you want to go. Because if you don't, you might end up somewhere else. Number 2, managing metrics saves you time. When you have a great scorecard and you're measuring the right things, you're going to eliminate all the subjectives and the egos, the opinions, the politicking of all the people trying to discuss, well, this is what I think happened and this is what I think happened. And so you just eliminate all that and it saves you a ton of time.
And how do you get buy-in from people that just tell you, like, we just don't have time, or it's going to take me way too long to calculate that number? How do you deal with that?
What you're going to find is that the amount of time to be totally reactive on those numbers, because you're going to, 2 a.m. thoughts, you're going to come in and say, hey, what's the sales numbers this week? And then that salesperson's going to have to go off, make something up, and then come back, and it's going to be wrong, and you're going to go back and forth, and you're going to waste a ton of time, where if you're taking a proactive approach, you're just going to save a ton of time up front. It's going to eliminate all that discussion, all of that back and forth, all of those emails and text messages could all be avoided. So it's going to save you a bunch of time. Number 3 is managing metrics gives you a pulse and the ability to predict. So I'm going to break that apart into those 2 parts. So number 1 is gives you a pulse. I mentioned the 2 a.m. thoughts. When you have a great scorecard, you understand where your business is at all times, and it gives you the ability to predict the future, because a scorecard is activity-based. It is the future view of your profit and loss statement. And so you're got that pulse on the business, you know all the right people are doing the right things on a regular basis that produce the ultimate results that you want. That gives you a great ability to predict.
I know it's a weekly pulse typically, but does it make sense to do a daily pulse?
It can in some scenarios. So for example, an HVAC business has a mantra of win the day. And they take actions every single day that leads to them winning the day. And so for that type of business, that might make sense. So really you get to customize your scorecard to meet your business, but typically it's a weekly scorecard and there's really never an excuse to not measure weekly because it's activity based. So some numbers you might have to wait monthly, some might be quarterly, but the issue there is that the feedback loops are way too far apart. And if it's quarterly, it might be 6 months before you can take action to course correct to get you back to where you want to go. So weekly is best. You can adjust as necessary, but that's really where you want to start.
And what about, like, how long does it take a client? How many times, how many iterations of the scorecard to really give them the ability to predict?
Where they have that pulse and the ability to predict, sometimes it takes 3 months before they can tweak and hone, refine the right measurables for them that gives them that complete sense of calm and control over the business. And sometimes those might change over time, but really 3 months is where you want to give it, where that's about how long it takes before you find a scorecard you love. So number 4, you must inspect what you expect. So with this, it's about creating a culture of accountability and creating a culture where if whatever we want, we're going to have a measurable to it, and we're going to inspect that on a regular basis. And so you just get to the point where everyone in the company has a number, and they're expecting that you're going to inspect what they're doing. And that's okay, and it's totally normal. And you want to normalize that culture of inspection. It's not a bad thing.
What if somebody doesn't want to be measured?
If someone doesn't want to be measured, you have to first go to the people component most likely. And when I'm talking about people, I'm really talking about right people in the right seats, people who share your core values and they get and want and have the capacity to do their jobs really well. And so if someone's like, no, you're not going to measure me, well, you probably have the wrong person doing that job. Number 5 is you can have accountability, a culture of accountability, and high trust. So many people, they might say, hey, you're going to inspect what you expect. What? Don't you trust me? And they kind of say, you know, hey, I've got it. I've been doing this for 40 years. Don't you trust me? And that's not the point. You can have high trust, but it's about culture. It's about I care about you enough, I trust you enough, you trust me enough. We're crystal clear on what it is that we want with actual data, not just feelings.
It's a little trust but verify?
It's a little bit trust but verify. And it's really, it kind of goes back to number 4 just a little bit, inspecting what you expect, but this is about the human part of it, where we're just trusting one another that I'm going to do my job, you're going to do your job, and we're going to hold each other peer accountability with that. Number 6 is scorecards require hard work. Can't tell you how many times I would help a client create a scorecard, and a month later we would come back, or 2 months later, whatever it was, and half of it was filled out, and week after week boxes stayed empty. And the reality is it takes consistent daily action, consistent weekly reporting, and it's hard work. Nobody wants to do it. And so it creates a compound interest that yields dividends later, but it takes a lot of work to do it. That's consistency.
Do you find sometimes that clients only measure what's available versus measuring what they actually need to measure? It's just harder to find or harder to get maybe the data?
Sometimes it is very difficult to measure if you don't have systems in place that are digital in nature, but you can do it as simple as a point on a whiteboard, right? You can just do hash marks there and you can pretty much measure anything. It doesn't always have to be a digital automated system that's measuring. So many people struggle in the beginning having the systems and processes in place that allow them to measure things. So you got to get a little creative. Maybe you might take on the inverse and say, well, how many times did this not happen versus how many times it did happen? And so you can get really creative with that. So the last one is one person owns it. So when you get those scorecards that are just not filled out consistently every week, chances are there's an accountability issue somewhere, and you got to make sure that one person on the team owns that scorecard. They're accountable for filling it out each week, getting the data from all the different places they need, so that when you come together as a team, it's ready to go to fill out so you can drive the business forward.
What about your experience with just one person just being really passionate about changing the scorecard when they're surprised by something, or it's just no longer the right measurables?
Never be afraid to update the scorecard so that you have that regular pulse. Because if you're just measuring the same old things and the business changes, the market changes, or maybe you have a quarterly project that you're working on that requires weekly activities, never be afraid to update your scorecard so that you have a pulse. The best way to understand what that is if you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night, oh, I wonder what that thing is, and I need to go ask this person, and you end up going, violating pretty much all the 7 truths in order to get the information that you need to make a better decision so you feel comfortable with where the business is going. And so having that one person to own it, it's okay for them to add and make the decision and add new things to it, set goals for it over time.
Does it matter who owns it?
It doesn't. I would say the person who should own it is the one who's most likely to fill it out and the most likely to get everyone else to give them the data to fill it out.
Is that integrator then?
It certainly could be. Sometimes it seems to be the CFO or the finance person who has access to more systems than others do. And so sometimes it makes sense for them to do it.
But you're looking for passion above all else for the topic.
Passion, consistent daily action and execution, someone who's just the drumbeat.
right? The discipline.
A discipline. Yep. So the bottom line with these 7 truths is that you simply must believe that if you do these 7 things, you're going to get more of what you want from your business. You're going to have a complete sense of calm, control over where the business is going and how you're going to get there.